Neolithic dreamer. I, the temple priestess, recline on the oracular bed, eyes closed, face immobile, full figure succulent as a fruit for the picking, waiting for whispers of divine madness, for the sacred breath which will set eyelids flickering, body trembling with receptivity. And I feel the word in my flesh, hear it pulse in my blood, know it in my heart, until the syllables force themselves to speech, loosening my tongue, unlocking my jaw, assaulting the very air with their power. God burns for you, thirsts for you, desires you, longs to place flesh, sinews on brittle bones that you may live. Look into your hearts and see the cankerous worm rooted in rot, the blackened places calloused by hate, the tightening bands of steel which squeeze and shrink what breath remains. Look and see death. Then I smell fear, sourness of sweat, rankness of unwashed beast. The footsteps retreat, and I am left alone as I always am, when the message is more than they bargain for, when the revelation demands thought, action, new ways of being, when the dream may swallow both dreamer and those dreamed about. I arise, slowly at first, as though from drunken stupor, and I see before me spirals etched into the place of sacrifice, red ochre smeared on megalithic walls, and I remember fragments of fantasy, chimerical notions that speak truth deeper than fact. My feet touch ground, guiding me from shadows into sunlight, into the salt spray carried by the wind. Here on the cliff's edge, I untie my hair and rest my eyes upon the sea. A reading from Woman Dreamer, a book that I assembled many years ago, 1989 precisely. A book which chronicles my first encounters with the divine feminine, or in other words, with a whole range of imagery and naming that presents God not only in the traditional masculine language, but also in feminine terms. It's not that I am hypothesizing a goddess and a god, but rather looking at God as one, but having a multiplicity of forms and naming, much as in Hinduism. And so this figure of the woman dreamer, this woman reclining on a cot, found in a megalithic temple dating back some 6,000 years. 6,000 years ago, she was somehow put in the Hypogeum in Malta along with 7,000 skeletons. And this particular figure remains a figure of mystery for us. Was she a goddess? Was she a priestess? Was she a devotee looking for impregnation or for wisdom from the ancestors? We don't know. But one thing we do know is that she was a woman of power. She is strong, she is corpulent, she has big breasts and big hips. She is not afraid of her sexuality. There is red ochre on the cot. You can't see it in this black and white photograph, but red ochre is a form of clay imported to Malta, which lies in the heart of the Mediterranean, from Sicily, 60 miles north. And so the ancient peoples then thought enough of this red clay, used as a symbol of fertility, as a symbol of menstrual blood, and they imported this clay all the way from Sicily to decorate their figurines and their temples, the oldest temples in the world. These are the temples that fashioned my religious imagination, along with statues of saints on street corners. And so I grew up then with a religious imagination shaped not only by Christianity in both its popular and hierarchical forms, but also by images of the divine feminine that I found in the temples of my homeland. And so my concept of God grew bigger than that which I was presented with in the classroom. And I began to realize that God cannot be named or defined or cannot be given a gender. that God is beyond all things and beyond our wildest imaginings, and somehow tapping into what I will call the divine feminine, that whole vocabulary of images and words which allows us to see God differently. This somehow allows us to have a richer and a deeper sense of who God is, as well as a broader understanding and a deeper understanding of other religious traditions. The woman dreamer, for me, as I said, is a symbol of power. She represents a time in history when women did have status and power. She stands in stark contrast to those perverted images of the feminine, to images of women merely as sexual objects, to images of women as property, to images of women as goods to be traded, goods to be despoiled. She stands in stark contrast to the lot of women who are killed in honor killings or who are traded for sexual purposes. She is a woman complete unto herself, revered, respected, and with a sense of power and purpose in life. And so for me, she is important to remember. She reminds me personally of my own dignity as woman. The world I was born into was a world of privilege, but it had its price. And the price was this: in spite of all the material comforts that came along with birth and good standing and societal recognition, was the price of invisibility. Women were merely to be accessories. They had no purpose beyond child raising and looking good in society. They were supposed to have tidy, beautiful homes, look impeccable at all times, but basically were not expected to have anything to say of value. In fact, I remember my parents having dinner parties, and at the end of the evening, it was time for the men to have their cigars and their cognac, and the women had to leave the table at this time to go and powder their noses while the men enjoyed the cognac and the cigars. And I remember as a teenager feeling outraged that this was the case. Not that I liked cigar smoke, not that I liked the cognac, but certainly the conversation was something I felt excluded from, and the idea of having to go and powder my nose at a certain designated time in the evening seemed very offensive. The woman dreamer is a symbol to me that women do not have to be held down, held back, oppressed, named negatively, treated negatively, or oppressed in any form of way. This figure has empowered me, and through her I have empowered others, and they in turn have gone on to empower others. We need to be reminded of this time when women did have power, and to recognize that that power exists within us still, even if we have forgotten it. This figure, in different forms, however, is alive and well in our culture if we can only find her, and in other cultures as well. In Mexican culture, for example, you have the figure of Our Lady of Guadalupe, that powerful indigenous symbol of Mary, a Christian figure, of course, dressed in the robes of an indigenous person, with the same skin color as an indigenous person, not a white oppressor, but one of the people. The wonderful story of her miraculous apparition to Juan Diego is a story which empowers not just women, but men as well. As the story goes, she appeared to Juan Diego and said, "Build me a temple." And he said, "Well, how will the bishops believe me? How will they know that I have seen you?" And so she instructed him to gather the red roses growing on the hillside in winter, in a place where red roses would never have bloomed, let alone in winter. And he gathered them in his cloak, and he went before the bishop, who said, "Show me, dear man, show me that this woman has appeared to you. Show me that the Blessed Mother has come to you." And the bishop was ready to mock him. But Juan Diego opened his cloak, And as he opened his cloak, out fell the red roses, but also imprinted on the cloak was the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, an indigenous woman confronting a white bishop so that he would build her a temple. This story continues to empower the Mexican people and many peoples from Latin America. Even in recent immigration marches, May 1st of last year, May 1st of this year, 2007, her banner was waved high over the crowds of millions of marchers. And her banner was the rallying sign behind which the people could walk proudly, proud of their culture, proud of their heritage, convinced through her that God was with them. And so again, an image of the divine feminine, empowering a people.